An ongoing siege in Sydney, Australia, a lone gunman and hostages. The PNG Australia Ministerial Forum delayed as Australian Minister holds an urgent teleconference. And questions raised over PNG's terror preparedness.
This is National EMTV News with Tokana Hasavi.
A very good evening to you and welcome to Monday's news. Over the last 10 hours, Australian authorities have been dealing with a hostage situation in a cafe in Sydney where more than 30 people are held captive. MTV's relay of the Channel 9 Australia's live coverage has shown dramatic pictures of heavily armed police attempting to prevent the situation from escalating. Australian authorities, meanwhile, are not calling this a terror attack, despite the fact that a jihadist flag was displayed during the siege. We begin tonight's news with this Channel 9 report.
Martin Place 1 hour ago. Hostages running and screaming from the Lint Cafe into the safe arms of police. They were two workers at the cafe, taken over by a gunman, still holding maybe another dozen staff and customers. 6 hours after being held at gunpoint, three hostages pull off a remarkable escape from the Martin Place Cafe and run down Phillip Street and into the arms of tactical police bristling with weapons. This was less than 2 hours ago. Their relief was clear.
We are with those people now. The first thing that we are doing is making sure that they are okay. We will then establish who they are and then we will continue to work with them.
The first terrifying images showing something was dreadfully wrong in Martin Place. They walked in as customers of the Lint Cafe. Within moments, they were hostages, ordered by a gunman to place their hands on the front window.
I came down in the lift, and when I got into the foyer, the right-hand side's where the cafe is, and there were people sort of standing in the doorway. I then looked and saw a policeman on the at the edge of the foyer, and he sort of yelled at me to get out. I walked towards him and he grabbed me and ushered me pretty quickly around the corner.
Then an ominous clue to the motivation driving the gunman inside. Two hostages with an Islamic flag above their heads, and on the window the words, "Merry Christmas." In minutes, scores of police were swarming around the cafe. Heavy weapons and body armour. Through the thick plate glass doors, a murky shot of the gunman, using a hostage as a human shield. He appears in his late 40s or early 50s and is wearing a black and white bandana. As one of the cafe workers reported for work, through locked doors, he saw the gunman inside.
There was one guy walking around with a hat and a beard, and he was just walking around just there, and I think I saw my manager there. And then I was talking to another guy. He told me it was armed robbery, and then that's when the police showed up, and then they cordoned off the whole area, and then that's when everyone inside put their arms against the window, like hands up, and then they put an ISIS sign up on the window.
It soon became very clear this wasn't an armed robbery. One hostage was videoed drawing her hand across her throat.
It's pretty bad. And I would rather be in there with them than be out here not knowing, you know.
It all began to unfold in the heart of the city, Martin Place in the CBD. At 9:30, a man is reported to have been seen entering the Lint Cafe with a bag. Calls were made to police a short time later, around 9:45 a.m. The response was swift, and by 10 a.m, the whole area had been placed into lockdown. Mid-afternoon, the police commissioner made the grim assessment.
We've moved to a footing that would be consistent with a terrorism event.
4 hours into the siege, this was Martin Place, the upper end, completely deserted with only a few police cars cutting off the streets and manning roadblocks. But down here at Castlereagh Street, several hundred people watching the police operation, and everybody here probably sharing the same thought. How could this happen in the centre of Sydney? Up to 10 staff, maybe a dozen or so customers, held at gunpoint by one man, Blocks around the cafe were evacuated.
Keep moving.
At one stage, floors near the cafe were cleared. Office workers climbing down a ladder. The hours dragged with no breakthrough, and it seemed like the city was emptying.
We are being tested today in Sydney. The police are being tested, the public is being tested, but whatever the test, we will face it head on.
The sight of hostages sprinting down Phillip Street was a rare bright spot. On a day, Islamic terror paralysed the city.
Meanwhile, the Australian government and opposition have presented a united front on the terror attack, saying it will not affect the lives of Australians. This report again from Channel 9.
A Christmas tree was the backdrop, but the Prime Minister's tidings had nothing to do with comfort and joy.
I can think of almost nothing more distressing, more terrifying than to be caught up in such a situation, and our hearts go out to those people.
Tony Abbott didn't immediately brand the hostage taking a terrorist incident, but he went close.
We don't know whether this is politically motivated, although obviously there are some indications that it could be.
He called the situation very disturbing, but urged that people not succumb to fear.
I would urge all Australians today to go about their business as usual.
Opposition leader Bill Shorten backed up that steadying message.
Australians are shocked, but we won't be shaken. We face moments like this with resolute spirit.
Federal Cabinet was in session when news came through about the Sydney siege. Mr Abbott turned it into an impromptu meeting of the National Security Committee, with Foreign Minister Julie Bishop, Defence Minister David Johnson, Border Security Minister Scott Morrison and Federal Police Commissioner Andrew Colvin taking part by secure video link from Port Moresby. The government and security agencies had been ready for such an emergency since alarming intelligence information caused them to raise Australia's terrorist alert level to high back in September. Mr Abbott spoke to the New South Wales Premier Mike Baird and the State Police Commissioner Andrew Scipione, called the opposition leader to bring him up to date, then at noon held detailed talks with the chiefs of ASIO and ASIS and other officials before calling a media conference. Cancellation of the scheduled release by Treasurer Joe Hockey and Finance Minister Matthias Cormann of the mid-year economic and fiscal outlook was considered and rejected.
I want to assure people that the ordinary business of government must go on, and it will go on.
We cannot allow these events to shut down our country.
The Treasurer had a particular portfolio interest in what was happening in Martin Place.
Yes, the Reserve Bank is right next door to the Lindt Cafe, and yes, I've certainly been in contact with the Governor today about that.
After another National Security Committee meeting late this afternoon, the Prime Minister issued this reassurance.
Yes, it has been a difficult day. Yes, it is a day which has tested us, but so far, like Australians in all sorts of situations, we have risen to the challenge.
And this morning, before the PNG Australia Ministerial Forum, Australia's Prime Minister Tony Abbott held a teleconference with key ministers currently in Port Moresby. The business dialogue was delayed by several minutes as a result. EMTV's Delhi Bagu was at the Airways Hotel where the conference was held.
The crust of the Australian Cabinet's National Security Committee is in Port Moresby. Foreign Minister Julie Bishop, Defence Minister David Johnson and Border Minister Scott Morrison discussed their country's security issues with their Prime Minister from here. Ms. Bishop was seen on the phone in an intense conversation, possibly in relation to the security threat that happened in Sydney this morning. Inside, the discussions were held behind closed doors at the Airways Hotel, but the media was given a short time to film before the forum began. According to the program, a PNG Australia business dialogue was held in the morning, followed by a meeting with PNG's Minister for Religion, Youth and Community Development, Delilah Gore. There were discussions over a possible establishment of a Pacific Leadership and Governance Precinct. Other topics included foreign affairs and immigration policies and programs of interest to both countries. No doubt, national security was one of those issues. It is not known if the Australian ministerial delegation will continue its planned stay. They are supposed to visit the autonomous region of Bougainville tomorrow and meet with President John Mommis and visit the Panguna Peace Building Strategy Office. Delhi Bagu, National EMTV News.
Oro Governor Gary Juffa says Papua New Guinean agencies that deal with transnational crime are currently underfunded and lack the capacity to handle hostage situations like the Sydney siege. He said agencies like the Police Transnational Crime Unit and the National Intelligence Organisation have been allowed to deteriorate over the years.
Over the last 10 hours, the world has been gripped by the hostage situation that unfolded today in Sydney. Major networks from all over the world have been closely following the plight of about 50 hostages held at the Lind Cafe in central Sydney.
Chaotic. Everyone's on their phone. They don't know what they're doing. They're contacting their relatives.
We've been advised to close and go home for our safety, and that's what we're doing.
While the Australian government is not treating this as a terror attack, it has not prevented public concerns over the links this lone gunman may have had with terror groups. Oro Governor Gary Juffa says this one incident brings to light weaknesses in Papua New Guinea's national security barrier.
What is our intelligence community saying? Does the intelligence community exist in a cohesive sense? Is there a national security strategy for the country?
The former head of customs says agencies like the NIO and the Transnational Crime Unit, organizations tasked with intelligence gathering and national security, are not able to adequately do their job. And this places Papua New Guinea in a high-risk situation.
Primarily, it's a resource and funding constraint. At the same time, we as decision makers have just simply not given much thought to this situation.
Weaknesses in PNG's national security extend to Papua New Guinea's defence force. It is an army underfunded with limited capacity. This means much of our borders with Indonesia are left unguarded. Scott Waide, National EMTV News.
Prime Minister Peter O'Neill has expressed his concern for the welfare of hostages being held in the unfolding security situation in Sydney. He said the thoughts and prayers of Papua New Guineans are with the people who have been taken hostage and their families. He said PNG is shocked to see this situation occur in our closest neighbour. Mr O'Neill hopes a peaceful resolution can be achieved soon. And when we come back, the day's other stories. Governor Juffa sends a strong message to Australia and another police officer attacked. The details coming up next. Good to have you back with the news. The former head of Customs and Oro Governor, Gary Juffa, has issued a strong message to Australia saying the Australian government should not subcontract asylum processing to Papua New Guinea. Juffa's statement comes hours after the arrival of a high-level Australian delegation led by Foreign Affairs Minister Julie Bishop. Juffa added that Australia should take care of its own problems.
That a greater effort needs.
Gary Juffa has been against Australia's move to have asylum seekers processed in Papua New Guinea. Today he sent out another strong message to the high-level Australian delegation headed by Julie Bishop that is in the country for the Australia PNG Ministerial Forum.
Look, I'm very much against the subcontracting of a nation's responsibilities under the UN Charter on refugees, you know. That charter was signed in 1950, created in 1951. Australia signed in 1954. They can't subcontract this to Papua New Guinea, and we shouldn't be accepting that. That's their responsibility. Why can't they build a processing facility in Darwin or in Cairns, for instance?
Juffa's comments come after the Australian government approved funding for a new processing centre in Port Moresby. It also follows instances of violence at the Manus Asylum Processing Centre, which saw the death of an Iranian detainee. Juffa has since condemned Australia's latest attempt to add to the ongoing asylum processing strategy.
Those refugees want to come to Australia, not Papua New Guinea.
The PNG government, meanwhile, has been very supportive of Australia's strategy. As part of the deal, Angao Hospital in Lae has received funding for an upgrade and roads have been improved. Scott Waide, National EMTV News.
A police reservist was stabbed multiple times on the chest last night at Jack Pittock Park in Port Moresby. He is now recovering at the Port Moresby General Hospital. This attack brings the number of police officers assaulted by the public to 4.
Witnesses said the incident occurred at around 11 p.m. when most families were returning home after last night's festive celebration. The officer was taken to Port Moresby General Hospital's accident and emergency ward where he is currently receiving treatment. In the last 3 months, there have been numerous attacks on police officers at the Gordons, Hola and 9 Mile areas. 3 of these attacks are said to be individual revenge by public on certain police officers' behaviors towards them. A police officer was also killed in Mount Again.
And so I must warn my officers that we are for the community, and therefore we should do the right things and enforce the law rightfully.
The incident at 5 Mile is believed to be related to an earlier robbery by members of the NCD reservist unit on some youths from the 6 Mile area. According to police reports, the unit stole 800 kina from the youths. Vasina Tayama, National EMTV News.
Papua New Guinea still has no national strategy for addressing violence against women and children. Almost 40 years since independence, the country will have its first national strategy tabled in Parliament next year. Once gazetted, it will be the first.
Violence against women and children is a growing concern in PNG. However, the national government, since independence, still has no national strategy on violence against women and children. NGOs and faith-based organizations that deals with violence against women have their own strategies. However, the government itself has no national strategy.
And the gender-based strategy that my department, through the Office of Development for Women, has been busy consulting the provinces on, is really a strategy that will help all partners, including government, find their niche in that strategy.
Every year, more women and children become victims of violence. Statistics show that about 6 out of 10 women got beaten or are verbally and sexually abused. Early next year, Minister responsible Delilah Gore is expected to present to the Parliament the first national strategy on violence against women.
And this is for the first time the country has a gender-based violence strategy. We've never had one before.
Once gazetted, all organizations that deal